one of the issues likely to dominate federal politics this week. As I mentioned a moment ago, we're now joined by, may I call them Messrs Left and Right, Craig Emerson, Minister for Tertiary Education, Skills and Science, and also spokesman for Families, Housing and Human Services, Kevin Andrews. Gentlemen, good morning. Thanks for joining us today.
That's a pleasure.
Nice to have you on board. Now, Craig Emerson, Malcolm Turnbull has said there are resonances of the pink bats debacle in this NBN asbestos issue. What's your response?
I think that's a very unfortunate manoeuvre from Malcolm. Let's not subject everything to politics and trying to get a political advantage over political rivals. Obviously, we have an attitude, as I think all good Australians do, towards asbestos, that it is a dangerous substance. We will do everything we can to minimise and indeed eliminate the risk of asbestos being contacted by people, but Malcolm, you can do a lot better than that. The ministers are making a statement today and we're working with both Telstra and NBN Co to remove these risks. Obviously, asbestos is a very dangerous substance. This government has a very active program more generally in dealing with asbestos and asbestos-related diseases, and you well remember the campaign that this government supported by Bernie Banton in terms of workers who were affected by asbestos from James Hardie employment.
Kevin Andrews, the government itself is not digging the pits, of course. If Telstra contracts this work out to inexperienced people when they know the nature of their own pits and what's down there, how can that be Julia Gillard's fault?
Well, if the NBN hadn't been designed on the back of a drink coaster on a VIP flight between Kevin Rudd and Stephen Conroy, and if there had been a proper cost-benefit analysis, a proper cost-benefit study done, then these sorts of risks would have been highlighted and there would have been proper procedures put in place to deal with them. I mean, Telstra say that they know that there was asbestos in the pits. The NBN management seem to know that, and yet there's been a total incompetence in terms of the administration and the carrying out of this program.
But again, doesn't that just come back to Telstra? I mean, as I said, it's Telstra's own pits.
Well, Telstra, as I understand it, has a responsibility for remediation of the pits, but NBN also has a responsibility where they're expanding or enhancing the use of those pits. So this is not about apportioning blame to one or the other. It's about simply saying that if the risks had properly been assessed, then we wouldn't be in this situation now.
You say it's not about apportioning blame, Kevin, but you're trying to shift the blame and get some political points out of a very serious health issue here, and I think it's pretty much the coalition taking the low road. There's no need for it. Everyone in the coalition, in the government, has an attitude to asbestos, surely, that it is a dangerous substance and we need to remove any risk. Can't that be above politics? Can no issue be above politics for the coalition?
Well, look, possibly
Craig.
if I can just jump in there with a question, though, for Craig Emerson. You can argue that you'd like to see it above politics, but given that it is an issue, as you say, your government has taken so seriously, one would have thought that all elements involved in this might have addressed that pretty seriously before the sledgehammer started swinging.
Well, obviously there've been, it hasn't been perfect. There have been problems here. Who wouldn't admit that? But to blame that onto Julia Gillard because of the design of the National Broadband Network, I think is going the low road.
All right, look, we'll move on to other subjects because I know
who's responsible for the
I'm
design?
so sorry. I will have to cut you off there just because we've got to move to some other subjects. Kevin Andrews, have had a pretty good go on this one, and I know that your time is tight this morning. We've kept you waiting, so my apologies. Kevin Andrews, under a coalition government, asylum seekers would have to work for their benefits, we're hearing now, over the weekend. Does this mean that, like the government, you'll be releasing them, asylum seekers, into the community?
Well, our aim is to actually reduce very substantially the number of people who come here by boat. We've now had 43,000 people, 700 boats. Julia Gillard once said that every boat that arrived was a policy failure, so we've had over 700 policy failures. Our aim is to stop this trade, to stop the people smugglers, and to not put people in a situation where they're risking their lives on the sea. So that's our first aim in this area.
Sure, but if they do manage to get through and they're here, we can assume then, given what we heard Scott Morrison say, that they'll be released into the community and they can't work any more than that. They can just sort of earn back through work in the communities their portion of the New Start. So there'll still be a burden on charities and church groups.
Well, this is a balance. If we were simply to say to people who come here unlawfully that you can go and work with everybody else, that will provide a further incentive for people to actually get on boats, risk their lives and come to Australia. But at the same time, this is costing the Australian taxpayer billions upon billions of dollars. It's not unreasonable to say to people in that situation, you have to do some work for the dole. If you're going to come here and we're going to provide a minimal level of support for you, well then we want something in return, whilst at the same time not providing any greater incentive for people to get on the boats.
Craig Emerson, how does the government imagine that, at the moment at least, 10,000 asylum seekers and certainly more released into the community on 89% of Newstart and unable to work is not going to turn into a massive social problem?
We're applying the no advantage test. That's a test that was recommended by the Houston panel. We don't want to provide incentives for people to arrive by boat compared with the alternative, and that is an orderly immigration path to Australia through the humanitarian program. So that's the principle.
I understand that's a principle, but you see the effect. The effect is all these people in the community with nothing to do.
Well, we can either make it attractive for people to come to Australia or we can make it unattractive. I think the Australian people in general would regard it as the right policy to make it unattractive for people to come to Australia by boat and risk their lives at sea. Now, the Coalition have been saying that they would stop the boats. That's the slogan, that they would stop the boats within weeks, and now they have to concede that they don't have a policy to stop the boats. In fact, that's what they're talking about, how they treat asylum seekers who are here. And disgracefully, Julie Bishop has lied directly to the Australian people through the Guardian newspaper by saying that she's had confidential discussions with senior ministers in Indonesia and they're all A-OK about turning back the boats. That is completely false. Marty Natalegawa, the Indonesian Foreign Minister, said they would not accept that. It was not raised by Tony Abbott with the President of Indonesia, and even he admitted that. I have had discussions with very senior ministers in Indonesia. They said they would not tolerate it.
Okay.
The Indonesian ambassador has said he would not tolerate it.
Hang on, I need to give Kevin Andrews a response to that. That's a pretty serious allegation. So, Kevin Andrews?
Coming from a government, Virginia, coming from a government that has trashed our relationship with Indonesia,
it's a good relationship.
That's a big call on Craig's part. The reality is, well, when I was the last Howard Government Immigration Minister, we had 3 boats on my watch, Craig. We stopped the boats before. You had a solution. You turned it into a problem. We will fix the problem as we did in the past.
But what about, can you address that direct allegation there by Craig Emerson that Julie Gillard, Julie Bishop, I'm sorry, is not representing the situation correctly?
She's lying.
I'm not going to use your term. Go ahead, Kevin Andrews.
Our relationship with Indonesia will be restored to the relationship we had in the past. Julie Bishop and Scott Morrison and others have been to Indonesia. They have a good relationship. I mean, the President of Indonesia
has she spoken to the people that she says she's spoken to?
I'm saying the President of Indonesia rolled out the red carpet for Tony Abbott and other senior members of the opposition, something that never happens before, and that's because you've trashed the relationship with Indonesia. We'll put that back onto a respectful footing and not treat the Indonesians the way this government has done.
We have an excellent relationship with Indonesia, and the fact is Tony Abbott did not raise towbacks with the President of Indonesia, was forced to admit that. Marty Natalegawa, the Foreign Minister, said it was never raised. Now Julie Bishop is saying that Tony Abbott has raised this at the most senior levels of the Indonesian government. It is completely false. Julie Bishop has not successfully raised it with Marty Natalegawa, and the Indonesian ambassador said it's completely false.
Okay.
They would not
I trust
tolerate
Julie
it.
Bishop before I trust you, Craig.
I'm going to leave this subject here. Gentlemen, can I keep you just a quick moment longer? Is that all right? Because I did want to ask you, Kevin Andrews, about whether releasing to the media that letter to the Independents about a possible no-confidence motion ahead of that letter actually reaching the Independents, does that look like a tactical error now?
Oh, no, look, I think what's becoming clear is that the Independents, particularly Mr Windsor and Mr Oakeshott, are simply welded onto the Gillard government. Every indication is there that that's the case, in which case we've got 11 more sitting days before the Australian people can finally have a say about this incompetent government.
But Tony Abbott has said for quite some time that he wanted to have a say about this government as well in bringing his no-confidence motion. He said that before the budget, he said that afterwards as well. well and he still won't bring it on. If he really believes that, if he really wants to test confidence in the Prime Minister, why not just bring it on?
Well, if Mr Windsor and Mr Oakeshott are clearly ruling out any real consideration of this matter, which seems to be what they've said in their comments over the weekend, then what's the purpose of it? They've made their position clear.
So what was the purpose of promising it if you couldn't get them on board in the first place?
Well, we've tested whether or not we could get them on board, and it seems like they're stuck irretrievably to this incompetent government.
Sounds like a broken promise to me.
All right, let's just...
You can talk, Craig.
Let's quickly wrap up with something right out of left field, and that is that the Republican motion is being brought back, a Republican issue, I'm sorry, is being brought back onto the agenda, and that, of course, by both sides of politics, by Wayne Swan and also Malcolm Turnbull. Can I ask you both, where do you stand, constitutional monarchist or a Republican? Can I start with you, Craig Emerson?
Yeah, I support a republic. I think younger people probably a bit bemused as to why we're not a republic. You know, we're very fond of Her Royal Highness, but younger people would be wondering why we have a foreign head of state, with every due respect to the Queen. But it is a strange situation in the 21st century that the head of state of Australia is actually a British citizen.
Kevin Andrews?
Well, I was at the Constitutional Convention and I supported the model which the late former Supreme Court judge from Victoria, Richard McGarvey, put up. That didn't succeed. I don't think a direct election is a good idea because it actually sets up two focal points of power in the country, namely a directly elected president and the Prime Minister of the government. And that, I think, is a recipe for long-term constitutional problems.
Gentlemen, good to talk to you both this morning. Craig Emerson, Kevin Andrews, thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of the week.
Pleasure.
Rightio, thank you.
Thank you.